everybody. Welcome back to part two of your JCQ updates for 2025-2026. I am Rebecca James. I am one of the educational psychologists in Education Elephant, and I'm joined again by Mr. Nick Lait, who's head of examinations with the JCQ. So thanks again, Nick, for
That's
joining us
okay.
today. So what we have today is all the questions that we couldn't get to in the webinar that we held last week. So Nick has kindly come back on today and we're going to go through each of your questions. So they've all been organized into nice categories, Nick. So the first category we're going to start with is the category of extra time. And I'm just going to fire the questions at you.
And I will do my best.
Yeah, so the first question is coming in from Pamela, and she has asked, regarding the excerpt in the JCQ regulations around GCSE resits, she says they have to collect a lot of information, including comments and observations from teaching staff in relevant subjects and how they use the extra time awarded. She wants to know, though, does that collection of evidence apply to both Form 8 and Form 9?
Yes, so that's obviously that's nothing new. So obviously in terms of Form 8 and Form 9, what you need to be doing obviously is getting the information from teachers as to how the candidate's difficulty is impacting in the classroom, how it's impacting on teaching and learning, how it impacts when the student is required to produce work. And obviously, you will need obviously the teacher to confirm that the arrangement, in this case 25% extra time, is the candidate's normal way of working. So in terms of painting that picture of need and demonstrating normal way of working, getting that feedback from teaching staff, there isn't any difference between Form 8 and Form 9 Part 1.
Yeah, they've really been streamlined this year, haven't they? The Form 8,
Yes.
Form 9 in terms of what's required, which is much nicer. And she's actually also asked a second part of that question. She said, regarding the evidence that she collects, how recent must the evidence be? Because she says, because we're at the beginning of term and we haven't completed our mock exams, how do we go about collecting the evidence that the extra time is used in internal examinations? Yeah, and then she says, because mock exams haven't taken place and I'm required to prove the need for extra time, and this will only become available after the exams take place. So she's basically asking, how can they collect normal way of working in internal exams when it's happened after the fact?
Right. Okay. So I think if I'm getting my head around it, so the internal exams have already taken place. Is that right?
Yeah, she says
Yeah.
we no, she says we haven't completed mock exams, and she said the arrangements need to be in place before the mock exams take place, meaning the evidence I require to prove the need for extra time will only become available after the exam takes place.
Yes, there's several ways of doing that. What you do need to do, obviously, is to validate that 25% extra time is the candidate's normal way of working. Because when you process an online application, you are saying it's the student's normal way of working. When you're actually completing part one of Form 8 or part one of Form 9, which we've just discussed again, you're also sort of saying it is the student's normal way of working. So it is reasonable for a JCQ centre inspector to say, well, you said it's their normal way of working. Can I just see a small amount of assessment evidence? And that's obviously all we're talking about is a small amount. And that could be a timed classroom test. It doesn't have to be a full-blown formal mock examination. It could be a sort of a more lengthier end of year internal school test or sort of an end of term internal test. So I would say actually sort of work with the teachers, but just to be reassured, you could actually have, a timed classroom test where that student is using their extra time and the teacher can actually, I know it's not always a direct sort of link between, in the classroom and an actual exam, but if the student is actually needing extra time in a timed classroom test and the teacher can see the benefits of it, then that obviously will prove that it is going to be needed for a much longer, let's say, GCSE exam in the summer series.
That's perfect. Yep. Hopefully
Yeah.
that answers that, Pamela. So you don't need to do it in the mocks. It can be done earlier in internal tests, as Nick said. The next question has come in, has asked, this is extra time and rest breaks. If a student has previously had 25% extra time, Nick, and the staff have reported that rest breaks are used as well, can the 25% extra time be replaced and removed? So they must have decided that rest breaks is appropriate
Yeah,
to
I mean,
replace.
obviously there will be, won't there? I mean, there will be scenarios where you have a student who needs supervised rest breaks and 25%
Mm,
extra time. So just obviously make sure it isn't that scenario, that the student doesn't need 25% extra time and supervised rest breaks. But if it is your prerogative as the SENCO, I'm guessing, Rebecca, that's the SENCO that's posted that, we assume.
yeah, probably.
If you actually feel that supervised rest breaks are more appropriate than 25% extra time, that's your professional judgment. The only thing I would say is to make sure that you actually communicate that to parents so you don't get any kickback when it comes to summer exams or even more once the candidate actually gets their results next August if they're doing GCSEs or A levels next summer. So I would just cover your back if you are going to make that decision and make sure that a letter is sent to the parents to say that you've made the decision that their child is given supervised rest breaks rather than extra time.
Good advice. Very good advice.
Yeah.
We've kind of covered this already, but I'll read it. It came in from Jan. Can the evidence of how extra time is used include pre-learning, where some learners have some sort of pre-learning set? So this would transfer to perhaps spending the time fully. So this would transfer to perhaps spending the time fully reading the paper. I think she's saying that the learners, they've been given some sort of pre-learning, maybe pre-reading before they do the paper, and they've used extra time in that. Can that be used as a kind of a normal way of working or proof that they need the extra time because they don't need to spend so long reading the paper because they've learned bits and pieces? I think that's what Jan is asking.
Yeah, I mean, I think you do need what you do need is a timed internal test or a mock examination where you've got, say, the candidate that has changed color pen because I'm not quite sure how to answer that one because really what you want obviously well, what you the teacher wants to see obviously is how the candidate has used the extra time, and if you are actually having a sample of actual mock papers then you will be able to show to a JCQ centre inspector actually sort of their green colour pen. I mean, I think it probably is easier
Hmm.
actually to show an inspector. I think that probably would remove some sort of ambiguity if you actually had an assessment sheet where the actual teacher is sort of ticking, yes, they used the extra time, no, they didn't. And then if they did use it, then they actually sort of complete boxes to say, yes, use the extra time to actually complete the paper and answer all questions, or use their extra time to review answers and expanded upon them, use their extra time to review answers and correct them, etc. But the crucial thing then is you have a box where the teacher will write a statement on the overall effectiveness of the 25% extra time. So that might be easier. And it probably would also help the teachers as well. They don't have to scan and upload papers. But I do think you probably need something a bit more concrete, which is actually the teacher can use to say how they're using the 25% extra time, and it is proving effective. I
That
think I've
makes sense.
answered. Yeah,
Yeah,
okay,
it
that's
does.
good.
Yeah, it does
Yeah.
answer it. Well, it answers it for me. I think it's pretty clear. Thanks, Nick. Another extra time one. It says parents and past school deputy heads are pursuing extra time and threatening legal action against the school. Current normal way of working doesn't suggest this. And what can we do to protect assessors and inform heads of school to support?
So I think really what you need to do there, obviously, is to sort of to say to the parents, obviously, that 25% extra time, or indeed any access arrangement, can't be given because of a specific difficulty, whether that be a specific learning difficulty like dyslexia or a formal medical condition. So just because a candidate has a condition is not an automatic entitlement to an arrangement. And I think I would sort of explain, get all your sort of ducks in a row and sort of say to the parents, well, look, we really have investigated this. There's nothing that's come through from pupil attainment data. There's nothing from pupil tracking data. There's nothing from baseline testing or screening test results. Teachers, we've asked teachers to actually to monitor your child. There are no concerns from how they're working in the classroom. So I think, really sort of hammer home, and I know it's easy for me to say this when you're not actually facing the parent, but just explain to them that a diagnosis alone is not an automatic entitlement to an access arrangement. It is, particularly if it's a non-learning difficulty, that it is, that centre-based evidence, that school-based evidence is absolute, or college-based evidence is absolutely crucial.
Yeah, and I think we always try and emphasize that it's not the disability per se, it's the effect of the
Yes.
disability. You can have plenty of students that have ADHD but are coping perfectly well in the classroom. They don't need an access arrangement because the effect isn't so much that they're being significantly impacted. So I think
I
that's
think,
the message there, isn't
yeah, I
it?
think
It's the
that's really good,
effect.
Rebecca. Is to say to them, it isn't just that condition, it's the actual impact of that
Hmm.
condition in the classroom. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And that's hard sometimes because sometimes it is perceived disability equals access arrangements,
yeah.
but that's not the case. Somebody else has asked, Sinead has asked, if the candidate needed more than 25% extra time for some subjects, do they need test scores? She said, the awarding body are suggesting increasing the time allowed in increments of 5%. And she said, this student did not get some year 11 GCSE modules finished. So she's asking, does she need more test scores for 25, for more than 25% extra
So I
time?
think, yes, obviously modules, obviously I'm guessing obviously that must be a centre in Northern Ireland,
Northern
probably.
Ireland, it
Yeah.
is. You're right.
Um, so I mean, if that's a student with learning difficulties, then you are going to have obviously a compelling picture of need, and for more than 25% extra time, then you are going to have two very substantially below average standardized scores of 69 or less in two different areas.
Very low,
So
bottom
yeah,
1%. Yeah, very
yeah,
low. So, Sinead, yes, you do need not more scores, but a different band of different criteria. It's not the 84, it's the 69.
right.
Um, Somebody has asked if normal way of working is 25% extra time, and that has been their normal way of working since year 8 in Northern Ireland. And then when you test again in year 10, their scores have changed and it shows that they're not meeting the criteria anymore. What do we do? Do we simply remove the access arrangement this
Yeah, you
person?
have to. Yeah. And I think what I would do there is actually to try and sort of head off the inevitable parental sort of challenge, is to say you actually, rather than actually sort of being concerned about this, you should actually be, really pleased that your child has made significant progress and doesn't need 25% extra time. And I think, that, and sort of try and sort of focus on the positive with them and say, look, we really worked and they've worked hard, and actually they don't need it now. And that's a good thing in a way, that actually
It is a
the
positive spin, and I'd say it's
yeah.
going to be hard to deliver, but
Yes,
you
yeah.
have to put
But
something positive, and it
but
is
if they
positive.
haven't, yeah, but I mean, if they haven't got two below average standardized scores, or one below average and one low average standardized score, or even in the rare and exceptional two low average standardized scores, then you can't award it on, say, scores of 94 and 97, etc.
No, that's gone. Um, okay, somebody else, Nick, has asked, can I just check if a student has been using extra time throughout year 8, 9, and 10, and they have evidence that this has been the normal way of working, and it's needed based on the student's teacher's professional judgment. When the student moves to year 11 now, do I have to trial rest breaks or can the extra time continue because it's always been the normal way of working?
Yeah. So you wouldn't take it away from them.
Yeah.
So I'm guessing that must be a centre in Northern Ireland, Rebecca, is it?
It probably is looking
Yeah,
by the
11, but
email
it's
address. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. So yeah, so I wouldn't take it away from them if basically it's been their normal way of working. Teachers are reporting that they've used it effectively. It just wouldn't be fair.
Yeah, and that probably answers the next one actually. I'm reading them as I'm calling them out.
Right.
to Nick. Please could you let me know if a child who has an EHCP for ADHD and a history of 25% extra time must now trial rest breaks before we apply for extra time? So it's
No,
the
so
same answer, isn't
same
it?
principle, yeah. I mean, the only thing I would say, I mean, I did meet one SENCO. yesterday, and what she was saying to me is that what they do as a school is that so this is year seven England, so that would be year eight Northern Ireland.
Yeah.
So year seven England, Wales, year eight Northern Ireland. What she said to me is that they, as a matter of principle, start afresh in year seven, and they say that to parents. We're going to start afresh and actually look at what we think are the more appropriate. I mean, it may be, as she said to me, that extra time is, but they start afresh. But in that particular, in both those cases, if it has been sort of established earlier down the school, students using it effectively, it's working well for them, then you stick with it. You wouldn't then start trying to move them onto supervised rest breaks.
That makes sense. Thanks, Nick. Um, Someone has asked, when you trial supervised rest breaks for the first time, the Form 9 asks you about normal way of working. Obviously, there has to be a first time you used rest breaks, and therefore it's not their normal way of working until they've been using it for a few months. What do we put in the normal way of working box?
So you'd only be completing obviously Form 9 for supervised rest breaks once you had determined that it was going to or is going to be the student's normal way of working. So once you've actually sort of, trialed it, student is saying, yes, actually, it does work for me. Teachers can see it's making a difference when they're actually producing time work. That's when you'd come round to actually completing part one of Form 9. So you might say, during the autumn term of the academic year 25-26, we trialed supervised rest breaks. We were obtaining teacher feedback. The student explained how the benefits of it, and then following the trialing of supervised rest breaks over the term, we have now decided to put it in place for future, internal school tests or internal college tests, mock examinations. So really don't complete Form 9 until you've really
Not the
made
normal
your
way of
mind
working.
up that actually, yeah, supervised rest breaks is what we want. So they're working well, teachers are saying so, students saying so, rather than, yeah, the student is actually doesn't like them. There's a problem here, they're not completing work. Then you've got to go look at 25% extra time.
Perfect. And somebody else has asked, I have a candidate who struggles focusing for long periods and being sat still for long periods of time. She says, I really want to trial rest breaks, but this girl is not on the pathway nor has a diagnosis, and the parents are really hesitant to follow this route. Am I still able to carry this out and build this as her normal way of working?
Obviously, you'd need to be looking at supervised rest breaks first. If they've been ruled out, if you haven't got a formal medical diagnosis of ADHD or that there isn't a formal commitment to assess, so it's not just a case of being referred or on a waiting list. The student is on a waiting list and there is a formal commitment to assess, and I think you'd have to go down the Form 8 route.
Even for a rest break, though,
Oh no, no, so
if
that's
she
for
just
25% extra
yeah, for
time.
25%. So if she just wanted a rest break, she
Oh
can
yeah,
trial those ones
yeah,
without
and
anything.
absolutely, because
Yeah.
sorry, Rebecca, yeah, because obviously with supervised rest breaks, you don't need any specialist evidence for the
Yeah.
supervised rest breaks. It's purely the SENCO or equivalent members of staff's professional judgment. So if supervised rest breaks, you're fine,
She's
but if you
fine with that.
actually trial those and they don't work well, and you haven't got the formal diagnosis, that's when I say I think then you'd need to go down the Form 8
Yeah.
route in that scenario.
Yeah, and I think that's what she's saying. She must be sort of saying that the individual she's talking about does have difficulties with attention. She's waiting a diagnosis and she's going to trial rest breaks in between. So perfect. Somebody else has asked, Mary has asked, is there an infographic for supervised rest breaks?
No, we haven't got
No,
an
not
infographic
yet.
for super. No. So
Maybe Mary will
25.
make one for us.
So we've got 25%. We've got more than 25%. We've got obviously computer reader, and then we've got a scribe.
Super. So, Alison has asked if an OT assessment has given a diagnosis and it states that extra time is needed, does she still need to rule out rest breaks or trial and exhaust rest breaks?
I mean, I think the answer there is sort of what is the effect? Again, it sort of goes back, I think, to what Rebecca and I were saying earlier. So it's basically what is the effect of that candidate's impairment difficulty. So if it is very much around speed of working, then you would be looking at 25% extra time, because it's the same with a candidate with learning difficulties. Their learning difficulty is going to impact on their speed of working. I mean, they might need, if they've got other difficulties, they might need supervised rest breaks and 25% extra time. But for a candidate who's got sort of processing difficulties,
Mm.
functioning difficulties, you'd be looking at extra time because of this, where there's that impact on speed of working. So it really depends on how their
What the
difficulties
difficulty is.
impacted. But anything affecting
Yeah.
speed, I would say look at 25% extra time.
Great, thank you. Um, okay, this is a few questions now. We're moving on to the Form 8, Nick.
Okay.
So somebody has asked, can comments from parents be used on Form 8 or Form 9 for private candidates? Because there's very little information from anywhere else.
Yes. So the answer to that is an absolute yes.
Right.
So obviously, so where you've got an internal candidate, obviously you can't be writing statements like Rebecca's parent says she needs extra time, or Nick's parent says he must have 25% extra time. So that's what we've seen. But for a private candidate, that particularly obviously one that's being home tutored, that is absolutely fine. What you must do though, just make sure that within part one of Form 8 or part one of Form 9, you are clearly stating this is a private candidate, so
Okay.
that the inspector doesn't then say, well, why have you got why is this all peppered with parental comments? So obviously with a private candidate, yeah, absolutely fine. And
Great.
also, of course, the student voice will be important there as well, as what if they've got a private tutor, then you can work with them as well. Yeah.
Super. Thank you, Nick. When a Form 9 or Form 8 has not been given until March or May, and the staff have said that there's been no evidence of need since September by normal way of working, can the forms still be rolled over?
Well, so a Form 9 can't roll forward from GCSE to A level or other level three vocational qualifications. So, because
Okay.
don't forget, the Form 9 is solely that picture of need and normal way of working. So when the student moves up a level, you've got to complete a brand new picture of need based on that level three studies, whether that's A level or level three vocational qualifications. So if I think the person's saying, not that Rebecca, they've never used it. Um, no need.
Yeah, she's no
Yeah,
evidence of need or
no.
normal way of working.
If there's no evidence of need, well, the Form 9 sort of you can't roll forward anyway, and you
Hmm.
shouldn't be rolling a Form 8 if to a higher level if they haven't actually used the arrangement. Say at GCSE.
Yeah, that makes total sense. So the short answer is no. Um, Do you need, oh yeah, this came in from a few people actually. Do you need to hold on to all the samples of work around the comments from teachers, etc., for the Form 8, Form 9, or can you just summarize the feedback from teachers and place it on the Form 8, Form 9?
Right, so for the Form 8 and Form 9, that's where you're summarizing the teacher feedback. You might have, a really good example of the candidate's difficulties from one particular subject teacher. So you might want to say within part one of Form 8, Jack's difficulties are very much summed up by this comment from his history teacher, da 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 blah blah blah. But what the inspector may say to you is, oh, I can see obviously you've set out obviously Jack's difficulties within part one of Form 8. I can see obviously you've mentioned how Jack's difficulties impact in the classroom, impact on learning. You sort of mentioned here obviously the issues that Jack has struggles with when completing work. So could you just show me the feedback from teachers, or can you show me how you work with teachers? So you will need obviously those feedback sheets, however you're sort of collecting that, whether that be, a Survey Monkey, some form of Google
Google
form.
Sheet, yeah,
Yeah, so
form, yeah.
however you're collecting that information from the teachers, yeah, you're summarizing that, but an inspector could actually say to you, could you sort of like walk me through obviously some of the comments from the teachers and explain to
Nick,
me how you
does
work with
it
them?
need to
Sorry.
be, just a quick question actually that popped into my head as you were talking.
Yeah.
Does the say, for example, it's a Google form or a Google sheet, do they actually have to have the evidence printed out on
No,
file? No, it
no.
can be electronic.
Yeah. So I think that's a good point, Rebecca. So just to say, obviously, if you're a centre that has your access arrangements paperwork in hard copy format, then we will obviously, explain to the inspectors that for things such as the teacher feedback or the assessment sheets, you could be a centre that's quite happy actually. You're perhaps a smaller centre, so you are able to get teachers to give you the scanned scripts or scanned internal school tests. So we will be saying to the inspectors that some of the supporting evidence may not all be in the same format. So yeah,
Mhm.
you'd be
Okay.
showing, you'd be showing the inspector, a Google form or Survey Monkey, etc. spreadsheet. Yeah.
Okay, that's good. That'll save a lot of time, I'm sure. Um, can the Form 8, Form 9 be rolled over for vocational subjects that may not have been studied at school but are at a level 2 qualification?
Yes. So the simple answer to that is so if you are an FE college and you get a correctly completed Form 8, and I think sometimes that isn't always the case. But if you did get a correctly completed Form 8 with the evidence of the assessor's qualification, or you're able to check the assessor's qualification online, then you can roll forward that Form 8 both for GCSE resits and Level 1, Level 2 vocational qualifications, which are covered by the JCQ regulations. Same applies to Form 9. You've got a correctly completed Form 9. You've got, for example, the EHCP or the formal medical diagnosis, and you can use that for GCSE resits and or Level 1, Level 2 vocational qualifications.
Perfect. Thanks, Nick. Um, if this person asks, what if you have identified a student with an undiagnosed learning difficulty who experiences a persistent difficulty that impacts on their learning and there's clear evidence of need? However, they've never been given access arrangements. What order do you do things? Should arrangements be granted and established as normal way of working and then standardized testing done? Or do you do the tests before the arrangements are granted and tested? Any advice, please?
Well, I think you and I would both agree, wouldn't we, Rebecca? What you've got to do first, obviously, is get that picture of need, and you've got to demonstrate, normal way of working. But absolutely crucial first up, obviously, is to get the feedback from teachers. You might also have there the student feedback as well, so you're able to show at least how the candidates' difficulties are impacting in the classroom on teaching and learning, what teachers are saying. So once you've got that sort of teacher feedback, you summarize that within part one, you can see where the candidates' difficulties are falling. So it could be, reading, writing, cognitive. So it could be right
Mhm.
across all three. It could be more sort of reading and cognitive. So you've got, evidence there so the assessor knows what areas to focus on, and then you'd assess the candidate, and then you'd, having got that teacher evidence, then that should then be substantiated by the standardized scores. And then before processing an online application, you're going to have to get a small sample of assessment evidence so that you can be assured that the student is using the extra time effectively. They've got practice in using it. Teachers can see the difference. Then you process the online application.
Yeah, super. Thank you. Because I do know, actually, even just from dealing with teachers myself and different centres, they worry that sometimes if they've put an arrangement in place, they've gathered the normal way of working, they've gathered teacher feedback, and they've put access arrangements in place for the students, and then they do the testing, and all of a sudden they don't hit the criteria for the scores. But my take on that is always, it's not just exams that the students need the arrangement in. They actually need it in class, in homework,
Yeah.
to access the curriculum, to perform their best. So even if you put an access arrangement in place, not just for exams, but actually for access to class, it's hugely beneficial for the student. So I would try not to worry too much if you've put
No,
something in place and they don't reach the score threshold. The student is going to have benefit. They need it in class, not just exams. So I always think you shouldn't worry too much about putting something in place for a student in class, even if they don't hit the standardized testing criteria, because you've gathered the feedback that they need it. So they need it in class too. Somebody had asked, could you clarify the process of Form 8s, Form 9s from GCSEs to A levels, please?
Right, so there is a document obviously on the JCQ website, which obviously deals with obviously the rolling forward of Form 8s and Form 9s. So in a nutshell, you can't roll forward Form 9 from GCSE to A level or other level 3 vocational qualification, which we've mentioned earlier.
Yeah.
And then for a Form 8, where it's been correctly completed, you can roll that Form 8 forward, where the candidate will continue to require 25% extra time and or a scribe, but you need to complete Form 8RF. And
Yeah.
so Form 8RF is really that updated picture of need. So, what are the candidates, say A-level teachers now saying, what are the candidates' difficulties in those A-level classes? And as you've just said, Rebecca, so are they actually, using the extra time in the classroom for timed tests? Are they, they're not going to be given, 20 necessarily 25% for homework, but, are they actually being given an extension for when
Hmm.
they actually submit, work for marking by their teacher? So you do need to complete Form 8RF, and of course you would need to process a brand new application for, let's say, GCE qualifications.
Great. Perfect. Um, you must have given I don't know what it was, but you must have given an example in your PowerPoint presentation last week, because this person has said, in Nick's example, if you are processing a new online application for a reader for a student who has an approved
Yes.
online assessment, you know
Yeah.
what it is, for
Yeah.
25%
Yeah.
extra time, do they need a separate or new Form 8, or can you add the original Form 8 and just put a new date in the computer reader box?
Yeah, so basically I mean, it wouldn't actually be obviously a Form 8 because obviously as it would be a standalone regime, it would be Form
Form
9,
9.
but it would be silly to ask you to complete, another form. So yeah, so what you would do is within part one of Form 8, you would just say that in September 2025, it was identified that Mark needed a reader. This was based on concerns from his subject teachers. We trialed, the use of a reader in timed classroom tests, or we trialed the use of a reader with him in some short internal school tests. It was shown to make a considerable difference. Mark actually, commented favorably on the use of a reader. It has now become his normal way of working. So, a short statement like that, and then just perhaps they just like initial it, put the date in, and then you just explain to the inspector the circumstances that arose leading to the Form 8 being updated and information being given on a computer reader or reader.
Perfect. Thank you. Um, this person has asked, there was a mention of an updated Form 8. If you've already started using last year's Form 8 and assessor testing, can you still use the old Form 8, or does everything now need to be transferred onto the updated Form 8?
Rebecca, I was gonna say I had that recently. I was gonna say it's a bit like mastermind. So you started, so you finished, isn't it? Do you remember that? I can't remember. It was something they used to say at the end, didn't they? So basically, it's that same principle. So if you started part one of the old format, there weren't that many changes this year, to be fair. But if you
No.
started using the 24-25 version, so you did part one in July, and now you're moving on to assess those students, you don't need to transfer all that information to the new 25-26 format, or basically, you did part one, you did part two in the summer term, let's say, right at the tail end, July 2025, and now you just you're back in term, and you're desperately trying to sort of finish off those formats, then again, you just complete part three. You wouldn't have to start all over again. Yeah.
No, that's a relief, I'm sure, for whoever asked
Yes.
that question. We better get them that answer quickly. Okay, the few just rag bag of different topics now, modified papers, homeschooling, and a few other bits and pieces.
Sure.
So, um, somebody has asked here, although we've kind of answered it, what are the expectations for collecting teacher evidence for external candidates, both in part one of formate and also testing papers. I guess that's where the parental comments and tutor
So
comments.
yeah, so I think it's going to be very different for a private candidate. I mean, they might, if they've got a tutor, that tutor may be setting them assignments. So you could ask the tutor, if they could actually provide you with some past papers that they've actually been working on with the student where they've used the 25% extra time. So the candidates, used green pen. There was somebody that actually had a really good phrase for green pen, but I can't remember it now, Becca. But so yeah, so you could certainly ask, work with the tutor, the private tutor, and see whether they could actually give you some assessment material. Sometimes, obviously, the private candidate is learning themselves.
Mm,
So they don't have a tutor. So I think there probably you'd have to ask them to like give you like a work log. So where the actual, the private candidate is actually saying, well, I started on this task such and such a time, I finished, and then asking them obviously to sort of set out the difficulties that they encounter. I mean, they might be trying to sort of tackle a past paper themselves, and what sort of difficulties do they actually, encounter when they're trying to work on a past paper, when they started it, when they finished. So really like sort of keeping a log of their difficulties, and are there difficulties with reading, writing, sort of it takes some time to sort of gather their thoughts and get them down onto a keyboard or on paper. So that's leaning more towards cognitive processing. So it's going to be
mm,
very different for a private candidate. Or the log could come from the parent. But you just need to be making that clear, obviously, that it is a private candidate that you're dealing with here, so that the inspector understands. And you say, well, look, it's not like a student in school where actually where the teachers are setting them timed classroom tests. They're doing, end of year 10 or 11 internal school tests, mock exams. So it's very difficult. They don't have a tutor. So we've asked them if they could actually sort of set out their difficulties via a logbook.
And they could give them some sort of template or something to fill out, couldn't they, to help them
Yeah,
structure their thoughts?
yeah.
Yeah, that's good advice. And actually, the same person has asked, I guess it's regarding external candidates as well. Um, we've been asked to provide supporting evidence for an online application, but she said it's involving quite confidential pupil information. We'd prefer not to send these documents as standard email attachments. Could you please confirm whether these can be provided on a secure platform, Nick, for
So I think
security?
the answer to that is, well, you need to contact the relevant awarding body as
Okay.
to how, if there is concern, obviously, as to the confidentiality, and I would sort of clarify with the awarding body, is that need, is that needed, or could it actually be that it's more of a centre statement? But I would, yeah, ask the awarding body how that
Awarding
information,
bodies.
yeah, could be
Okay.
sent to them secure, more confidentially and securely, shall I say? Yeah.
Yeah, thanks, Nick. Um, somebody has asked some pupils, this is about modified papers. Some pupils are not aware of which tier of exams they want to enter, like higher or foundation. Do we apply for both tiers if the modified papers are required for such pupils?
Um, I mean, really depends in your school when that decision is going to be made. So if that decision is going to be made, because obviously the entry deadline is the 21st of February. So I would
Hmm.
say obviously that if it's, and obviously we've got half term running sort of through there as well.
Do,
So I
yeah.
would say that if you're going to get a decision before half term, which you must be, because obviously the entry deadline of the 21st of February and processing the entries before the school goes on half-term break, I would probably wait, and then you just submit the order, whether it be foundation or higher tier.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sound. Um, this is somebody who's asking about mobile phones or noises. They said they have a student who listens to car engine sounds, and he has a phone which is in a folder set up by his parents and it's checked by the school. He wears headphones. Is that okay to do in a small room, she said, where the invigilator has control of the phone? So obviously the student has it on his own phone.
Yeah, so long as the invigilator's in control of the phone, that would be fine.
Okay, that's good.
Yeah.
Um,
That's a new one, car engines. That's
car
interesting.
engines. I've never heard
Yeah,
that either. Yeah,
no.
that's I had a
But
smile
yeah,
if
so
but
that's fine. Yeah.
Someone, well, this is just a comment which I'll read out to you. Can we, and it's maybe a good idea, can we please have one form to complete instead of a Form 8 and Form 9? She said it's really confusing and stressful, worrying we have the wrong form all the time. If it was one form that had all the information, it would make it much easier. This process would be quicker and mistakes wouldn't happen. I'll just leave that one with you.
Yeah, I think we've debated that one in the past, haven't we? And I'm sure that somebody somewhere would say this form is too long because of
Too
course Form
unwieldy.
8, yeah, because of
Yeah.
course Form 8 has to have the test scores, and the test scores could be for extra time or a scribe.
That's
Yeah,
true. That's true. It gets very long. Although they are being more streamlined, the Form 8
yes.
and Form 9. So who knows in the future? So they're always improving. Um, this is to do with special circumstances. For a neurodivergent student who has recently developed a health condition, it means that they're short of school time to build up their art portfolio. Could these possibly be eligible for special circumstances?
So you'd have to discuss that with the relevant
Awarding
awarding
body.
body. Yeah, because it's a
Okay,
subject
there you go,
specific
Trisha.
query. Yep.
Um, um, Somebody says, I'd like to go with the electronic access forms. Can I start with the current year 11 in Northern Ireland and then have year 12, year 13, and year 14 in paper form? Or do they have to do everything the same, like all electronic?
No, 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 no. So you could actually start transitioning with one particular year group. That's often how centres do it. Rebecca, I've seen it in England as well. I think I've had one recently where they were going to be moving to electronic for their year 10. So that would be the year 11s in Northern Ireland. But the other year groups were still in hard copy. But eventually everything within the
Okay.
school would be. So that's absolutely fine. That's not a
Yeah, and that
problem.
makes sense, doesn't
Yeah,
it?
yeah.
To bit by bit. Okay, these questions are around rolling forward and resets. First question, do we need new teacher evidence when completing a Form 8 or F?
Yes, you do. I'm afraid you do, because that's the whole purpose of the Form 8RF,
Yeah.
is that you're wanting obviously new teacher feedback. Because, and I had one very recently where the student had 25% for GCSEs, but now they're on an A-level course. The centre was looking at 35% extra time
Mm,
because of the greater stretch and challenge. So you could have
okay.
actually that scenario where the student was fine with 25%, but because of the greater, demand at A level or essay style question, stretch and challenge, they need more than 25%.
No, that's really
Or
important
yeah,
because I think we often think of it as the other way, don't we? We often think of it
yeah,
as being taken away, but actually
yeah.
reassess because they might need more. That's super important.
Yeah. Then, of course, conversely, of course, you could get the situation, of course, where let's say at GCSE they needed it in subjects with extended writing, but their A-level choices are maths, physics, further
Of
maths.
course.
They
Yeah.
don't need the extra time. So that's why it's important that we do get that updated centre-based evidence on both counts.
Makes complete sense. Thanks, Nick. Um, if what about pupils moving from GCSEs to A levels? Is it still the old 8 or F? And do we need evidence? I think that's the
We've
same.
just done
That's
that one, haven't
that's
we?
the
Yeah.
same. Yeah, they're both the same. For a GCSE resit in November, do I need to reapply on the JCQ website, or is it only the transition between GCSE and A level?
So if you are a school and that student is remaining in your school, and the online application hasn't expired, it will still cover the November series, then you don't need to do anything at all because you've got a valid online application which will cover GCSE exams in November.
And
If
if
you
it's run out, they just click.
process a new one, yeah, they
Yeah, they don't
process a
need to
new one.
retest or anything like that.
No, no,
Literally
no, no.
just, yeah.
Yeah. And if you're a college and you're receiving a correctly completed Form 8 from a school with evidence of the assessor's qualification, then all you need to do is just simply process a new online application under your centre number.
Perfect. Um, in relation to Northern Ireland, do the new access arrangements apply to a pupil in year 12 who's already sat modules in year 11? Or is the existing documentation able to carry through for access arrangements like extra time? So maybe there's somebody that I'm just guessing, I don't know, but maybe somebody had the old rule of the cluster of scores in the 90s, for example, and they qualified back then, but they don't meet the existing criteria now, do they still qualify for extra time? They're asking based on the old criteria.
So they are they still GCSE, are they, Rebecca, or
They are going for, no, they'll be gone up to A level.
A
So
level?
yeah.
Right. I think in that, so I think in that particular case, what you would need to do, obviously, you would certainly need your updated centre-based evidence. Um, and I think what I would then do is, so if you've got teachers that are saying to you still that the candidate needs 25% extra time and you get some samples of assessment evidence, because they had it at GCSE, I would process that as an awarding body referral.
Oh, interesting. Okay,
Yeah.
that's good to know, Nick. All right.
Yeah.
So even though the test score criteria has changed,
I
they
think that would be fair
still,
to that
yeah,
student. So if
that's
they
good.
definitely used it at GCSE,
Hmm.
then you obviously would need to make that as part of your awarding body referral case. So they definitely used it at GCSE. You've got teacher evidence that they st are still using it for, obviously in Northern Ireland, it would be AS units first.
Hmm.
Get some assessment evidence like, a timed classroom test, or a longer internal school test. So so in a nutshell, you've got some assessment evidence showing that they are using that extra time effectively. It will get not approved and then refer it to the awarding body and say they used it for GCSE under this criteria so as to avoid disadvantaging the candidate. Could they continue to use it for AS and A2 units? And I think that's fair. Let that type of
That's
student run
fair.
out, but anybody new coming in, that category is now gone because very
Super.
few people used it, didn't they, Rebecca? I
No,
mean,
and in fairness, I don't know if that's the category she's talking about.
no, sure,
But could be
yeah,
something else. I don't know. But
I
whatever
imagine,
she's talking about, she's saying the criteria has changed. That was the only one I could really think of.
yeah,
Um,
you're probably right.
So someone else has asked for GCSE resits, the November series, where the candidate is now an external candidate and they're sitting their exam in their old secondary school. Can the same application remain valid?
So if they move centres.
So it says the candidate, well, they're now an external candidate and they're sitting their exams in their old secondary school. Can they use the same
Right, okay, yes.
application?
So actually, so what I think what that person's saying is they're going back to their former school to reset. So in that
Yeah,
scenario, so
yes.
if the online application hasn't expired, you don't need to do anything. If the application has expired, then you just need to process a new one
Okay.
for GCSE. So it's just basically checking whether you have got currently you've got an approved application which will cover the November series. If it does, no, nothing to do, no further action.
Oh, easy. Okay, great. Thanks, Nick. This is to readers. If a person only needs occasional words read or a reading pen, do you need to apply?
No, so an examination reading pen, which is what obviously they should be using for occasional words or phrases, that's centre delegated and
Okay.
don't need any
Oh,
evidence, no online application. It's your judgment call.
super. Um, for gap years, can the Form 9s or Form 8s still be rolled over? Well, we've just talked about the Form
Yeah.
9s not being, but she said for the gap years, can you roll over a Form 8, for example, and the same question for apprentices?
So the JCQ regulations don't cover apprenticeships, so I'm not quite
Right?
sure what
That one.
qualification that is. So I think in terms of a Form 8, I would say that you could probably, we're talking about 25% extra time or a scribe. I think you would, if it's more than 5 years old now, then you're going to have to reassess. Because I think if you think about a Form 8, it's really say 2 years on a GCSE course, then say two years on an A level or a level three vocational, factor in, resets or perhaps, GCSEs being done over 3 years. So let's say 5 years. So if that so that would take us to 2020. So if it was done before 2020, no. But the other thing is that you will, if they're returning, you would need to double check that they do continue to meet the criteria, particularly with 25% extra time. So because you might find that they just got one below average standardized score, which of course ceased
Mm.
to not to be allowed in September 2021. So you would need to check, particularly the standardized scores, as to whether they do meet the current criteria.
Okay, great. Thanks, Nick. I'm just flicking through. I think we have answered all of the questions. I'm just having a quick scan to see, did I miss anything for anybody? There were a lot of questions that came in on Swift, but I think we answered all those on the platform. I think we have gone through everything, Nick.
Brilliant.
We're
Okay.
off the hook and we've been exactly an hour. Just to say thanks a million to you, Nick, once again.
That's
You're
okay.
very
It's a
good,
pleasure.
very generous with your time. Thank you very much. And hopefully this will go a long way towards supporting people with their access
Yeah.
arrangements and help them feel more confident, I suppose, in the processes that they're using.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
thanks again, Nick. And we'll see you this time next year.
Hopefully, yeah, fingers crossed.
Thanks so much, Nick.
You too. Thanks, Rebecca.